Up on that. I wouldn't pull you up on that, madam, but I'm going to call Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Part 2 of this bill is all about consequential amendments for the main harm, I guess, which has already just been voted on in this House during the debate this afternoon. And I want to talk about those consequential amendments because they are based on the very basic but false premise that people who are on benefits today are there because they don't want to work, and they are people who don't want the best for their children. So all of these amendments are based on that very false premise. And we know that it's a false premise. Well, on this side of the House, actually, we know that it's a false premise because when Labor was in government, we had very low unemployment in this country. We, in fact, had the lowest unemployment in the OECD for many of those quarters. And when we weren't the country with the lowest unemployment in the OECD countries, we were, in fact, the country with the second lowest unemployment in the OECD. So what Labor has proven is that if given the chance, if given a vibrant economy where there are jobs there to be applied for, that of course people will apply for those jobs. Of course people will ensure that they have the skills to go and make sure that they are at the front of the queue for those jobs. But what this government has delivered those people is actually no hope. Not a brighter future like they promised, but no hope. Because they are standing in those job queues now, those jobless queues I should say, because they are a small number of jobs, hundreds of people lining up for them. And that's the brighter future that the government has delivered. But with these consequential amendments, one that it appears to me is so vitally missing is the one that would make some sense if the government really was using this legislation to improve participation in early childhood education. Because, Mr Chair, I do believe that in the right circumstances, there is the evidence that shows us that children who are aged 3 and 4 years old, for around about 20 hours a week, getting quality early childhood education, that does make a good and positive difference to their life outcomes. And actually, it particularly makes a good impact for children from low incomes. So that's perfect for many of these families for whom we are addressing. But, Mr Chair, those families don't withhold their children from that quality early childhood education experience because they don't want the best for their children. There are a range of reasons why sometimes their children do not make it into that situation. And here's just one. It was in the newspaper a couple of weeks ago, actually, that actually the very good 20 hours free early childhood education policy that Labor brought in was in fact exactly to improve access to these very families, but not in a punitive way, in an encouraging, supportive, let's take the barriers away kind of way. Now, what is happening these days with the 20 hours early childhood education policy is a lot of those providers, in fact this newspaper found 45% of those early childhood education providers, are actually saying to those parents, well, you can only have the 20 hours if you enrol your child for another 10 hours at a much higher fee. So I want to see the consequential amendment in this Act, Mr Chair, that actually stops that practice from happening. Because while that practice continues to happen, what we're going to see is benefits being halved as a punishment for beneficiaries who don't have their children in early childhood education, while they're being told by the early childhood education providers that they're going to have to pay a lot of money to even enrol their child there. So these are the very practical issues that this government's turning a blind eye to. Because when the Minister of Education was asked about that situation, she said, nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with me, they're going to shop around. So here is the government with this legislation forcing beneficiaries to put their children into early childhood education, punishing them if they can't do that, but then their own minister is saying, shop around. That's her answer to those beneficiary families. Shop around and see if you can get the worst quality.
I call Dr. Rajin Prasad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleased to take another call on